Last night in this fight we saw a lot of decent attributes. I thought Billy Joe Saunders' resilience, his toughness, his jab, his foot movement, his head movement, his ring positioning, his speed were all world class. He was putting in a performance there that to me was an 8 out of 10 performance. He got sucked into a dogfight late on, which I didn't like. At times, he was more hittable than I'd like. He didn't throw his left hand as much as I'd like. And I thought he let Chris Eubank back into a fight that he was well ahead of after halfway. There's scope for improvement from Billy Joe Saunders. His stamina and his sort of fitness in rounds 11 and 12 could still come on a bit. He needs to be busier with his power punching. There's still scope for the defence to tighten up ever so slightly. I think what we saw last night was a performance that represented a very competent European and Commonwealth middleweight champion with scope to win a version of the middleweight championship. It wouldn't surprise me if Saunders was successful against a Lee Korobov winner. I don't think it's the full final deal from Saunders, and I think there's still more to come from him. There's still an extra 10-20% on top of that, in my opinion. With Chris Eubank Jr., who performed with credit, he again showed good attributes. His fitness was there, his inside game was there, his uppercut was lovely, but there were gaping holes. He was so hittable, particularly in the first 5 rounds. Billy Joe was making him miss. Billy Joe was catching him with the jab. Jimmy Tibbs said afterwards in the IFL TV interview, that kid, Chris Eubank, is in serious trouble if they put him in with a power puncher. And I think he's hit the nail on the head. Eubank Jr., very good fighter when coming forward, when on his front foot, when allowed to dominate, when allowed to get into a fight, when allowed to throw combinations, which represented the second half of the fight last night. But a very raw green fighter when put on his back foot, when someone takes the fight to him, when he needs to be defensively minded. You know, Chris Eubank Jr.'s hitability and Chris Eubank Jr.'s tendency to be inaccurate have potential to cost him massively. The guy performed with credit. I've got new respect for him. He showed a lot of capabilities, but to my eyes, until he sorts out his hitability and until he sorts out his inaccuracy, it's going to be very difficult for him to progress to world title level, because it is very rare in a division like the middleweight division to see a world champion who is so imperfect on his back foot, so inaccurate. Some of the swings and misses from Eubank Jr. were reminiscent of Tony Bellew last week, reminiscent of Derek Chisora last night. He's smarter than that. He's better than that. And we need to see him go away, learn from it, and make adjustments. He could have got the job done last night, Chris Eubank. I think he needs experience. A Nick Blackwell or a John Ryder over 12 rounds would do him the world of good. I'm still not convinced he's the biggest puncher in the world. I know Billy Joe's tough, resilient, got a good chin, but this was probably the first time Chris Eubank Jr. ever faced a genuine middleweight who was even approaching British level. I'd say below this guy, his best opponents were Frankie Borg, Bradley Price, Tyne Booth. I'm not convinced about Eubank's power punching at the elite middleweight level, which is where he wants to go. So with that in mind, he needs to work on how he's going to win fights on points. He can't give away early rounds like that. He can't allow himself to be peppered with a jab and counterpunch like that. He can't allow himself to swing wildly and miss like that. The judges count that against you, they really do. He showed a lot last night, Chris Eubank Jr. And it's amazing how close he actually came to winning this fight with such glaring flaws to his game. He's got the potential to rebuild and to be a world champion. He may have the potential to beat Billy Joe Saunders in a rematch, but he's got to make those adjustments. Where do those adjustments start? At the gym. Now, I would suggest that Chris Eubank Jr. needs to take his corner team into his own hands. He was in deep, deep water last night. When you have a young fighter who's never fought at this level in a 12-round fight, and they're 5-0 down on the scorecards, what you do not need is your chief cornerman, the one who's allowed in the ring, prancing around like some sort of pantomime performer. What you do not need is advice saying beat him up, knock him out. You need structured advice. You need advice on attributes. You need advice on adjustments. Come in this way, keep your hands up, jab your way in, he's open to the left hook. You need advice that tells you what to do, not just knock him out. You need brains in the corner. You can't have people like Ronnie Davis and Chris Sanagar with years of boxing experience effectively silenced due to some PR attempt. And when Ronnie Davis does open his mouth, one of the Eubanks, I've heard conflicting reports as to whether it was Eubank or Senior, tells Ronnie Davis, I heard you, stop talking. Chris Eubank Jr. needs a trainer he trusts, a trainer whose advice he wants to listen to at the end of the fight, a trainer who can recommend adjustments, not just knock him out, get it done, a trainer who can tell him how to achieve those goals. And as painful as it may be, it may involve taking himself away from his father, maybe going to the States, maybe going with a respected trainer domestically. I think both guys have the potential to win versions of the world title. I think Chris Eubank Jr. needs 2 or 3 12-rounders before then. As it stands, Korobov is the favourite to win that fight. I'd probably have Billy Joe Saunders to beat Korobov. Let me know your thoughts.